Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over the approved ops update for Bheta Decima. But before getting into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of this video. Did you find it useful or helpful? And we've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, as well as an affiliate link Element Games and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, today I'm going over the new approved ops update using basically crit ops / approved ops for your games of Bheta Decima with the new layouts Games Workshop has made, as well as my own additional map pack that you can use for it, but I'll get into it later. So let's just get into the video. So since about, I think last Wednesday or Thursday, Games Workshop put up the PDF rules for the Bheta Decima terrain and kill zone, as well as the approved ops update. So once again, you can find this on the download section of the Warhammer community website. The kill zone Bheta Decima is just all the rules currently for the terrain system, and then we got the approved ops update. No other updates as well, so no FAQs still, even though it's been a while. But I guess Games Workshop wants to see how the kill zone does in the wild before they make any huge changes. But let's get into the approved ops update itself. So with the approved ops update, basically this lists how you play Bheta Decima using the critical operations / the approved ops update for kill team. So you get all four archetypes with all 6 Tac Ops, as well as some Tac Op tweaks and rebalances. So the first thing here is it kind of addresses the issue with the lack of terrain if you buy the Bheta Decima terrain itself. So it does say you can use the scatter terrain from Kill Team Salvation or other scatter terrain. I would highly recommend using that, and I'll get into that later. But they also gave objective rules for the objective markers, because you get 9 of them in the Bheta Decima box, and I would heavily advise against not using them. So let's get into them first. So a Bheta Decima objective marker is an objective marker as normal, but it's also a terrain feature with the line traversable traits. Part of it no more than black tall, e.g. its base and hatch, but not its eye aerial. Also have the vantage point trait. Unlike normal traversable terrain, this means operatives can finish a move on top of such parts, so long as this operative can physically place there. There's a few issues with this terrain, using these objective markers. The first is they cause lots of really weird rules interactions. For example, if you're on the ground floor, like you're on the kill zone floor and you're standing on one of these objectives, you're technically on a vantage point, so you bypass the ocean. So it turns out a small stumpy aerial stand trumps the ocean. The other issue is it causes weird interactions with beam cover, and also being a vantage point means when you're playing stuff like, I don't know, secure vantage, you can secure vantage while being on a vantage point or being on one of these objectives. And because you can effectively only fit one operative on these objective markers, like on these terrain features, you get, as long as you end your turning point on them, you score it. So they're not really good at all. I would actually say they're quite bad. Obviously, it's a stopgap if you don't get Kill Team Salvation scatter terrain, but you know, it's available a lot on eBay. People are trading it away, and also you can use other terrain to proxy it, like as the Into the Dark scatter. But key line here, unless they do like a huge FAQ / errata for these objective markers, don't use them as terrain. They're just not good. And then the next paragraph says, operatives cross the gap between different gantries, i.e. ones aren't connected, by jumping. Yellow lines on the mission map indicate the terrain features where objectives can do this to and from. When setting up the kill zone, ensure related gantries are an appropriate distance from one another so operatives can jump. And then they've done some Tac Op changes. So for example, plant transponder, when determining an operative more than white from the terrain features to perform this action, ignore gantries underneath it and the ferrotonic furnace terrain feature on its roof. So it basically means you can now plant transponder on the gantries as well on top of the thermo, the big terrain piece, so it makes it actually playable. So secure vantage has also been changed, so at least half of the vantage point you control must be within your opponent's territory. So like if a bit of it's in your opponent's territory, you can't control it for secure vantage, but as long as like at least half of it is in there, you can score secure vantage from it, which means you actually have to go to your opponent, because otherwise secure vantage probably would have been banned. So it's a nice fix. It's actually harder to do, which is good. Secure center line, operatives can now be in a vantage point to secure it, which is good. and central control has been replaced with ferrotonic furnace control. So you reveal it from turning point 2 onwards. At the end of any turning point, if the total APL friendly operatives on the roof of the ferrotonic furnace is greater than that of the enemy operatives, you score 1 victory point, and if you do again, you get another. So effectively, all the Tac Ops pretty much work. Hilariously, faction Tac Ops can be incredibly broken. So I think like Blow It Up is one of them. And then like Dark Desecration for Legionary is oddly really good because everything's heavy. So just some weird interactions there. Unfortunately, we don't have any changes here, such as if you're more than 2 white away from while crossing the ocean, changing that to ignore visibility. Well, you're not visible instead of you're obscured, because ignore obscuring teams kind of mess us up. And we don't have any changes to forward deploys, because forward deploys are also kind of strong / broken on Beta Decima, and those haven't been addressed, which is unfortunate as well. And then nothing really addressing Void Dancer Troop with Fly, although that may be addressed with Void Dancer Troops if they become a problem with an update. As I said at the start of the video, I guess maybe they're waiting to see how people play the terrain for 3 months. But I really, really, really hope they change it to the ocean hazardous area to you aren't visible to you are obscured, because obscuring is kind of crazy. Now, once again, if you just change it to the ocean floor, it doesn't affect if you're standing up above, but it just means you can't shoot out across the floor if you ignore obscuring. But we'll see how that goes. Then you have the standard key showing, you know, all the terrain features and how to lay it out for these approved op missions. So for map 1, you can kind of see it's mostly symmetrical, and you've got 6 evenly laid out objectives. The nice thing here, which you'll see as a growing trend with all the jumpable pieces, is that the jumps are effectively shortcuts. So if you want a quicker route across the battlefield, you can jump across, but then you have the risk of, you know, failing jump tests. And another big thing is jump tests aren't changed. So personally, I'm of the mindset that jump tests should always pass, but you roll a d6 every time you attempt a jump test. On a roll of a 1, you take 2 mortal wounds, representing, you know, like stumbling, for like missing the jump and like just grabbing onto the ledge and hurting yourself. I think that's a fair trade-off, because otherwise you're not really inclined to take jump tests unless you auto pass them. But I like how they've been used to basically, if you want to get across the map faster, you are taking shortcuts with jumps, but at the risk of just rolling a 1 and being stranded in the open. But I like Factorum, it's a really good layout. Then we've got Engineerium and our first asymmetrical map. So once again, we've got 6 objectives. They're all evenly laid out, and you don't actually need to jump to get to them. It's just a shortcut. But you've got some nice, interesting layouts there. Technically, I think the bottom side is better, because the top side, I wouldn't risk 2 jump tests, and you know, you can just move and dash across. But it's an interesting layout. Then we have Furnace, which is another 6 objective map using the opposite side of the game board, so you actually have some land in the middle. And it's very interesting, actually. I'm not sure which side is better, although I'm leaning towards blue side, just because you have effectively 4 closer objectives. Although it does look like red side has some better gantries, just not better. It's interesting though, you know, because the downside is you do have 1 objective in the open, so it's quite hard to defend, but you know, it's an interesting layout. Then you've got Generatorium, which is a hot dog layout. It's quite interesting. So this is our first long ways, and this is the only terrain feature where this is the only layout where you have to jump to the objectives, well, the central objective, right? I think you can theoretically jump down from the D ferrotonic furnace, but actually need to play out to see. But otherwise, it's a quite even map, although once again, blue side has more of an advantage, just because, you know, if you do secure the ferrotonic furnace, it's easier for you to reach and defend that objective on the center side. Then we've got Forge, which is another interesting map. This is more symmetrical, but still with some asymmetrical differences. This time, there's not much of a difference between which side you'd pick, although the crazy thing is, this is kind of a melee team's heaven if they can reach the center board, because on the ferrotonic furnace, you have 2 objectives, and people are going to be fighting over those. Like, it's going to turn into a brawl on the ferrotonic furnace, so that's probably going to decide the game. But it's nice to have maps like this. It's effectively a 5 objective map, and it's good to kind of cause that interaction, especially on a board that heavily favors shooting. Then you've got Foundry. This is probably the worst layout. I'm not going to lie. We only have 6 layouts. I'm not really a fan of Foundry. As you can see, all the objectives are in the middle, and it's kind of a crazy zigzag. It's effectively a dash towards the midline and then slowly fighting up towards the ferrotonic furnace. Jumps are probably going to be where you need to just leapfrog towards the ferrotonic furnace, although I would have liked more jumps towards the middle, because it's kind of just weird. I think if you just moved like the 2 objectives on C and B, on those gantries, onto red side B and blue side C, just to cause some, like, not turtling, but so each side has a safe objective, but then it still incentivizes you fighting on D, like, or even putting the D objectives on ferrotonic furnace on right side B, right bottom side B, and then blue side C. That would have been interesting. I think it's kind of flawed, but we'll see. Like, we'll play it out. I don't think it's horrible. It's just a weird layout. Like, it's one of the maps where, as I said, I think people will drop it, and it's just a really big scrum for the middle. So one big criticism is when I told people about the approved ops update, people were like, there's no scattered terrain. It's horrible. I can't use it. Or like, I don't know what to do. So I decided, in terms of like inspiration, like, Ryan from Turnip Point Tactics did some great maps for, open play, like they're widely used. And I thought I would just do this for approved ops, for hazardous areas. So what this is, it's using the scatter terrain from Bheta Decima, and this will be downloadable, like, on the episode description. Like, that QR code should link to the article where it's like table of contents, and you can download the PDF, and there'll be images and everything. So effectively, all I've done is just scanned in the Kill Team Salvation terrain and placed it where you can appropriately put it on the terrain to give you a guide where to place scatter. Now, the thing is, if you can't find salvation terrain, as I said, it's available on eBay. At the moment, you can get in the UK for like 15 quid for the full set. But you can also use Into the Dark terrain to proxy it as well. Like any appropriately sized terrain. Like in the UK, our locals have been using like Into the Dark scatter terrain to provide some scatter terrain for Bheta Decima if they didn't buy Kill Team Salvation. But effectively, this document is just a guide to help you set up your own Kill Team Bheta Decima approved op boards just with some scatter terrain. So I've put in this document all the condensed informations as well as the green lines on the layouts, which actually show how you should orientate them, which I've done so just to basically promote more protection from shooting, because that was another big complaint people have. But this is page 1, it's got all the collated information there. Then this is page 2, showing you all the rig apparatus. I didn't put any other proxy terrain stuff, but all you need to remember is the micro generatorum is light and traversable, while everything else is heavy and traversable. And I've put the map icons that you'll find on the following pages just to help, explain it to you. But once again, you don't have to use these terrain pieces. You just need 5 appropriately sized terrain pieces. And you only have to remember one of them is light and traversable. The other 4 are heavy and traversable. So for Factorum, all I've done is effectively add thermovents to the red drop zone and the barospheric inducer to the blue drop zone, just to provide some safer areas to deploy. And also on the blue side, because of how wide the barospheric inducer is, if you're a 40mm base, you have to traverse through to get to the mid zone, which I think is a fair trade-off. And it just adds some more safer deployment. And then I've put the rotary converter on the left-hand side, so it's actually not within dashing range if you use a recon dash, but it will provide obscurity. So even if you still ignore obscuring, you're not fully safe unless you put a barricade there to move and dash up towards. And then I've done the similar thing on the right-hand side with the reciprocating engine, just to provide some nice obscuring shots from either side, obscuring cover, as well as somewhere safe to move up. And then I've just put the microgenatorium on C, on blue side, just so it gives you some defensible cover if you want to move up. I've notably left the 2 central objectives quite exposed, but that's intentional because I think it's fair to have 2 objectives that are exposed that you can use barricades to get cover for. And it makes, the way I've put those 2 smaller pieces of terrain means it's easy to defend from being shot, but not so if someone just pushes up and moves on to the objective. So you actually have to be careful about how you play, and you can't play super defensively. But I think that's a nice change there. And as I said, with all these pages, I've put all the map play key as well as the Tac Op Changes, so you know what Tac Op Changes, and as I said, the QR code. For layout 2, I've put the rotary converter just in the middle between the two left objectives, just so both people can provide cover if they can reach it, but it doesn't fully keep you safe if you're both there. You would need to fight over it, and if you're on B or C, the platforms near it, actually doesn't provide any cover unless you're on the red side, so it's not entirely great. And then I've just put the micro genitorium on the right hand side, just for some cover if you want to move and dash up, like if you wanted to place a recover item there for some reason there. And then for C, on both sides, I've put 2 heavy pieces of terrain, and then on the ferrotonic furnace, I've put the last barospheric inducer just there to provide some more interesting cover to fight around. Notably, there are technically 4 exposed objectives, but 2 of them are, well, both objectives on B, touching the drop zones on those gantries, are within range for putting barricades, although you could brave it because you would still get cover from underneath on the ferrotonic furnace. So it's technically 4 defended objectives and 2 open, but if you wanted to be more accurate, there's 4 open objectives. But I think this is a more easily to defend with barricades, but it's still interesting choice and a good guide if you wanted to place terrain. Because the other thing is, I've seen people who want terrain on every objective, but I don't think that's necessary. Having 2 defendable objectives with terrain and the 4 and the 2 mid ones being more open and harder to defend forces some interesting choices. And as you can see with the green lines, the way those singular platforms are orientated should help provide some more obscuring cover. For layout 3, once again, you can see how the singular platforms are orientated, hopefully once again to help protect the drop zones a bit more. I've put the 2 smaller pieces of heavy touching the drop zone once again to provide more cover, but depending on your base size, if you're on blue side, you're actually probably not going to want that side. And then I've put the last small piece of heavy on the left hand side. The right hand side is more open, but because I've put the light piece of terrain on D, and the large piece of heavy on C, it's still quite open. Like, you've got enough space to run around, but remember you can use barricades to defend the 2 central objectives close to the drop zone, and on the right B gantry you can put a barricade there. So it's up to you which side you want, but technically the red side has more defensible objectives, so whereas the blue ones has more, open ones that are closer. Then for Generatorum, I've once again put the light terrain on the top of the ferrotonic furnace, just so it's some nice cover for you to fight over. And then once again, because this is now long ways, I've aligned the smaller platforms, even though they're behind the big ferrotonic furnace, just some more ways to block obscuring if there are shots. And then I've put the 2 small pieces of there's 2 small pieces of heavy cover covering the 2 bottom objectives. Still enough gaps for I think anyone but a 40mm base to move around. More so on the left hand side, because the right hand side will probably only allow a 25mm base without traversing, so important to remember there. But I've also put them behind the objectives, so it's not easy to fully defend if you're on top of the gantries, well, on top of the ferrotonic furnace. And then for the 2 central objectives, they're both in the open, so they can be defended by barricades, but if you get control of the ferrotonic furnace, you can just freely shoot down. So it does incentivize defending the ferrotonic furnace, while I've also put 2 pieces of heavy cover on C to provide some safe staging points for you to move up onto. Then for Forge, once again, we have the light terrain on the ferrotonic furnace. I've, on the blue side, put the second piece of heavy terrain just to give you a safer drop zone, because if you look at it on the red hand side, they've got the gantry of C with 3 pillars and then B facing the other way, providing some long cover. So just to offset C being quite a tough drop zone, I've put some heavy cover there, but in such a way that it doesn't allow you free movement up the board. It's actually going to obscure you a bit, so it's keeping you safe at the cost of movement. Then I've put those 2 small heavy pieces once again in the middle of the board, and then I put the giant piece of heavy on C on the right hand side, just to give them a safer staging point if they want to move up the board, to offset B having a safer drop zone to compensate. And then for Foundry, once again, we have the light terrain on top of D, the ferrotonic furnace. So oddly, people can just stay enough within range of the terrain piece while on the objectives if they want to do like dance of death, but not fully safe from being shot at the other side. So, you know, you've got a trade-off there. Then 2 heavy pieces on the middle side objectives, and then once again on the red side to give them a little bit of more defensible cover if they wanted to start in the mid zone. I've put the last piece of small heavy terrain just in case, you know, they want to play a little bit more cagey, then move up. But those are all my terrain layouts, and once again, it's not really changing anything. It's just guides where I've thought it's most interesting to put the heavy scatter terrain as well as, you know, the singular piece of light cover in such a way that at least 4 of the objectives are covered either by the terrain in the scatter or with your own barricades, leaving 2 fairly in the open that are going to be effectively fought over to decide who's going to win or who's braver. But hopefully that helps with giving you ideas of how to play scatter terrain. And remember, you don't have to use the Salvation Scatter. I'd highly recommend it. But as long as you can find appropriately sized terrain pieces, there's no issue to not use it. So overall, I like the update to the approved ops because, you know, now makes the approved ops and crit ops playable for Beta Decima. Disappointment-wise, you know, jump tests haven't been changed and the obscuring rule hasn't been changed. So they're like the 2 main things, well, the 3 things that need changing for Beta Decima, in my opinion, is jump tests auto pass, but every time you jump, you roll a d6. On a 1, you take 2 mortal wounds. But if you auto pass jump tests, you know, you're not affected by that. Just so like you're still incentivized to jump, but if you take that risk instead of just being stood in the open, you now take some damage on the way there. You know, that's a fair trade-off in my opinion. And then I would change, so forward deploys don't work on Beta Decima. I would, you know, maybe copy what Into the Dark does or just ban them completely. They kind of entirely warp the game system. So it's worrying Games Workshop hasn't addressed that. And then also, if you're on the ground floor of the kill zone, if you're more than 2 white from someone, you're not visible instead of being obscured. Because remember, you can still be obscured if standing from the gantry. So if you ignore that, you can benefit shooting down from the gantries, but it just makes people on the ground floor safer and less prone to being abused by people who have mass sources of ignore obscuring. Overall, I think the maps are really cool. I do like that we have more asymmetrical layouts. I think most of the layouts are asymmetrical instead of symmetrical, which is really cool. I think the only dud is layout 6, just because of all the objectives being in the middle. But as this is a PDF, maybe Games Workshop will change those in 3 months, you know, because it would just be involving moving 2 of the objectives. But overall, I think it's a good change, obviously, because it makes the terrain more playable. The downside is, obviously, like, they had to work around Beta Decima not coming with any scatter terrain. And once again, I would highly advise not using the objectives markers for terrain. Like, the pack says you don't have to use the terrain objective markers or scatter. It gives you the option to use either or both, and in my opinion, just proxy scatter terrain. Like, use any sort of appropriate sized scatter terrain. You can use the rules found in Kill Team Salvation, like they're readily available, and even the terrain for Salvation is quite readily available to find at the moment. You know, and especially if you have prior sets like Into the Dark terrain from box 1 works amazing as scatter terrain for Beta Decima, and you know, it can kind of link up narratively. I would just not advise using the objective markers. Like, the issue is they provide cover to every objective, which I don't like. And then the other thing is, them being vantage points causes a whole world of problems. For example, you can score secure vantage by standing on an objective marker that's, you know, mostly in your opponent's territory. And also, if you're on the ground floor standing on a vantage point, you ignore the ocean rules because now you're not on the ground floor. Very weird, right? So don't use the terrain objective markers, but use the scatter. And once again, I've done the terrain pack if you want your own guide how to place scatter. And once again, I've done it in such a way that there are always 2 open objective markers, but you've got 4 defended objective markers either by your own barricades or some of the scatter terrain within. And that'll be in the episode description, as well as my terrain living article, which you can use as well. But that's pretty much it from me today. I'll be doing some more battle reps soon using these new Beta Decima layouts for the scatter terrain. Hopefully it's helpful for people. But please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you think of this approved ops update. Do you like the changes to Beta Decima, or do you still think it needs some more? And what do you think of my terrain layouts for Beta Decima? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, and a affiliate link at Element Games. and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And I'll quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the career, I have Tom, Sam, Nikki Sticks, Nick, Mr. Meatwad, Kenzie, John Thomas, Graham, David, Dad of Goldens, Ben, and for my veterans of the career, I have Sam. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know. I like Beta Decima. I guess, as I said, Games Workshop wants to see what the community does with it for 3 months and then go from there. Hopefully we do get some changes. I think it's almost in a playable state, but I am low-key worried about the articles where they say all of this is intended because it causes a lot of problems. But I'm actually really hyped for upcoming Beta Decima terrains. Tournaments, sorry. I think for my own events, I'm just going to do Season 2 and Season 3. Because I think that's enough of a warping situation where no team really benefits. Because most of the people who are very against Beta Decima, saying shooting teams are too strong, never really said the same when Into the Dark makes it too good for melee teams. So I think running events of Season 2 and Season 3 induces enough of a warping environment that no team really succeeds on both than doing Season 1 and Season 3 tournaments. I think it's more interesting as well as than Season 1 and Season 2. But we'll see. It's something I'll need to explore and see based on player feedback as well as community feedback. But I hope this was helpful. I'll be back with more stuff this week. I've got so much cool stuff coming. I can't wait, especially for Thursday if you're watching this when this comes out on Monday or this week. But until next time, remember, no matter what happens in the high seas of Kill Team, there's always a chance to win as long as you can roll a crit.